My name is Aiden. I'm 28. And I had driven 4 hours from Chicago for what my mom insisted on calling our early Christmas dinner. Even though it always fell on Thanksgiving because, as she put it every year, it's more convenient when everyone's already here. I should have turned the car around the first time the thought hit me, but guilt is a stubborn engine. So, I showed up. I blended in. I swallowed the usual comments. And when the plates were cleared, my mom clapped her hands like she was opening an award ceremony and started handing out gifts, little luxuries, personalized things, laughter, hugs, one by one around the table, until the bag was empty, and she hadn't even looked at me. I asked quietly, "Was there one for me?" She didn't blink. "Be grateful you can sit here," she said. My uncle chuckled. "Be glad we still remember your name." And the whole table erupted like it was the funniest thing they'd heard all year. My chest went hot, but my voice stayed cold. Good to know. No yelling, no scene, just a clean break somewhere inside me. 2 weeks later, those same people would be pounding on my apartment door, begging me to let them in. But that night, I simply walked out, drove 4 hours back to Chicago in the dark, and decided I was done being the family's punchline. By the time I got back to my apartment that night, the city felt colder than usual, like Chicago itself was waiting for me to admit something I'd avoided for years. I dropped my keys onto the counter, let the door close behind me, and stood there, staring at the dim outline of my living room. The silence felt loud, louder than the laughter at that dinner table, louder than my mother's voice telling me I should be grateful they even remembered me. I wanted to tell myself I'd imagined the tone, that I was being sensitive, that families make stupid jokes. But somewhere in my chest, that clean, sharp snap was still vibrating. I wasn't imagining anything. They'd meant it. They'd enjoyed it. I sat on the floor with my back against the cabinet, my phone in my hand, thumb hovering over our family group chat. Part of me, some old reflex, wanted to send a long message explaining why the comment had hurt, why being the only one without a gift wasn't a joke, why I wasn't ungrateful or dramatic. But I could already hear their responses. My mom calling me touchy, my sisters saying I'd ruined the vibe, my dad telling me to lighten up. So instead, I scrolled to Megan, my best friend since college. She always answered. "I sent one text you up." She called before the message bubble even disappeared. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft, careful, and suddenly everything spilled out. The fake smiles, the staged affection, the way my mom had stood there with a whole bag of gifts but no space for me, the way my uncle's joke landed like a slap, the way everyone laughed like it wasn't aimed straight at me. When I repeated my mom's line, "Be grateful, you can sit here," Megan went quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Aiden, that's not normal. That's not loving. That's not even joking. That's them telling you exactly where they think you belong." I don't know why her saying it hit harder than the moment itself. Maybe because she didn't say it like an accusation. She said it like a fact, like a truth I'd ignored too long. While we kept talking, I opened my banking app, not looking for anything, more like seeking distraction, and the screen filled with charges. Charges I didn't recognize, because I never used any of it. My dad's streaming services, my mom's yoga studio, my sister's rideshares, deliveries, Prime orders, concert tickets, random charges at midnight for emergencies, theme park tickets with little notes like, "Can you front this? I'll pay you later." They never paid me back. Not once. And the worst part, I had never even asked. I'd spent years thinking I was being helpful. But looking at that list, colorless and emotionless on a screen, I realized I wasn't helping. I was enabling. They weren't treating me like family. They were treating me like a walking credit card with a pulse. Megan's voice snapped me out of the fog. "Aiden, what if you just stopped paying? What if you stopped feeding the whole machine? The idea terrified me more than I wanted to admit. But it also made something warm flicker in my chest. Something I hadn't felt in years. Control. That weekend, I sat down with my laptop and a notebook like I was prepping for an audit. And in a way, I guess I was. I pulled up every auto payment I had, every subscription under my name, every convenience my family had enjoyed, because it was easier for me to put it on my card than to hear them complain. My mom's gym membership, canceled. My dad's 3 streaming services, removed payment. My sister's Prime access. Rideshares. Little subscriptions they'd forgotten they even used gone. With each click are you sure you want to cancel? I felt lighter. Like I was clearing dust off a window I hadn't looked through in years. I didn't send an announcement. I didn't tell them they were cut off. I didn't deliver a speech about boundaries. I just stopped playing the role they wrote for me. 3 days later, the fallout started. My mom called first. No greeting. No warmth. Just, Aiden. My gym card was declined. Did your payment information change? No, I said calmly. I canceled it. You'll have to set it up in your own name. Silence. Then, outrage. You know I go to those classes for my health. You know I depend on that. How could you do that to me? I almost let my guilt answer for me. But something steadied in my chest. You know what you said to me at dinner? I said quietly. I'm done paying for people who think humiliating me is funny. She gasped like I'd thrown something at her. Are you serious? Aiden, over one little joke. One little joke. That was the new script. Later that night, my dad called because the streaming accounts weren't working. His tone was irritated. Like I'd failed at a basic chore. It says we need to update the payment info. He said. Fix it. I didn't mess anything up. I answered. I just stopped paying. He was silent for a moment. Then his voice hardened. Family takes care of each other. Exactly. I said. It goes both ways. He hung up on me. Then the group chat lit up. Not with questions. Not with concern. With passive-aggressive quotes and jabs. Some people forget where they came from. Money isn't everything. Family is forever, unless someone thinks they're better than us. I muted the thread and didn't look back. But the thing is, I'd grown up in that atmosphere. My family culture was built on invisible debts and unspoken hierarchies. On roles assigned before you even understood what they meant. And mine had always been the same, the dependable one. The fixer. The guy who would pick up the tab without being asked. The one they didn't have to appreciate because he'd show up anyway. My parents weren't monsters. They were just people who loved power more than accountability, comfort more than kindness. And they had spent years molding me into someone who didn't question any of it. But when I walked out of that dinner, something shifted. Not dramatically. Not violently, quietly. Like a door clicking shut in a long hallway. And once it clicked, there was no going back. By the time the text messages turned into TikToks, and the TikToks turned into guilt-laced paragraphs, and the guilt turned into outright panic, I finally understood something I probably should have realized years ago. They didn't fear losing me. They feared losing access to me. My money, my silence, my obedience. And as that realization settled in, so did another something heavier. Something older. The person who actually loved me with no conditions. No strings. No invoices. That was my grandfather. The only man who ever told me I didn't have to earn my place in the family. He used to tell me, you have your own path. Kid, don't let anyone convince you your worth is measured in favors. He died when I was 19. And without him, the family dynamic shifted fast, everyone moving up one space on the ladder. Everyone pulling rank. Everybody expecting more. Giving less. He would have been the only one to say, Aiden, get out. He would have been the only one who saw this for what it was. And as things escalated, online jabs, turning into pounding fists on my apartment door, I realized I wasn't just breaking a pattern. I was breaking the role they trained me to play since childhood. And they weren't going to let that happen quietly. In the days after I canceled everything, the pressure didn't explode all at once. It tightened slowly like a rope being pulled, inch by inch, around my ribs. My phone became a grenade I didn't want to touch. Every buzz was either a guilt-laced message from my mom, a demand from my dad, or one of my sisters dramatizing things online to an audience who had no idea what was actually happening. It started with inconveniences on their side, gym visits denied, streaming services locked, Prime orders delayed, but to them, these weren't inconveniences. They were attacks, personal betrayals, proof that I was selfish, disloyal, corrupted by city life. I didn't respond, not because I wanted to play games, but because every instinct told me that any explanation would just become ammunition. Then the real pressure started. First, it was my mom's long text, one of those paragraphs that read like a monologue in a play no one asked to see. She talked about her health, her blood pressure, her stress. She told me yoga was the only thing keeping her centered. Not once did she mention the dinner. Not once did she acknowledge what she'd said. Instead, she made every sentence about how my actions were hurting her, how she was the victim of her son's sudden coldness. My dad followed with a voicemail. His delivery was sharp, controlled like he was giving feedback to an employee. Aiden, you need to call me back. This behavior ends now. You don't get to make decisions like this without consulting the family. You're making your mother sick. You're embarrassing us. And frankly, you're acting like a child. He paused for effect, then added, you wouldn't have anything you have without us. I stared at the screen afterward, stunned, but not surprised. That was my dad's favorite line. Anytime he felt I wasn't showing the proper level of gratitude, he reminded me that everything from the roof over my head at 15 to the job I earned at 26 was theoretically his achievement. It wasn't new. It was just louder now. Then, my sisters jumped in. One of them posted a blurry photo of a sunset with the caption, "Some people think growing up means turning your back on the ones who always had your back. Sad." The other kept texting me things like, "Just talk to mom. Stop being dramatic. You're really hurting the family image right now." The family image, not the family. The image. That was always what mattered most. My stomach knotted tighter with every message. But the moment everything truly clicked was when I sat down at my kitchen table and opened my bank statements again, not to cancel anything else this time, but to actually see the full picture. 5 years. 5 years of charges that weren't mine. Rideshares from towns I wasn't in. Receipts for restaurants I'd never eaten at. Tickets for events I didn't attend. Month after month of subscription fees I barely knew existed because someone had said, "Can you just put it on your card? I'll pay you back later." And I'd nodded like it was nothing. I made a spreadsheet. It felt ridiculous at first. Childish. Like something someone does when they're preparing for a fight. They know they won't win. But as the rows filled, the feeling changed. There were over 200 entries. The totals climbed in numbers that made my chest tighten. The dates spanned birthdays, holidays, random weekdays. I remembered every conversation hidden behind those transactions. Every time I'd been made to feel cheap for asking about repayment. Every time I'd been told that family doesn't nickel and dime each other. Every moment I'd swallowed resentment so the night wouldn't get ruined. Seeing it all in front of me felt like looking at a map of every boundary I'd failed to draw. And then it hit me, the moment that shifted everything. It wasn't that they didn't know they depended on me. It was that they assumed I wouldn't stop. They assumed I didn't have it in me to walk away. And that assumption was my fault too. I had trained them to believe I would always say yes. So when I finally said no, they treated it like an act of war. The next day, The group chat escalated. Messages filled with guilt, anger, denial, rewritten history. They talked about me like I was a stranger, like I'd been corrupted, like I was the problem, not the system we'd all silently maintained for years. But the more they pushed, the more something inside me hardened slowly, quietly, deliberately. It wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was recognition. I'd been the emotional pack mule of that family for years, carrying the weight so no one else had to, paying silently so they didn't have to make sacrifices, absorbing every jab so their image stayed uncracked. And now that I'd stepped out from under that load, they didn't know how to stand up on their own legs. That realization hit right around the time the demands became expectations. You need to fix this. You need to call mom. You need to update the payments. You need to come home for Christmas to explain yourself. Everything was always my job. The pressure crescendoed when I ignored all of it and didn't pick up a single call. The messages went from guilt to anger, then from anger to desperation. Because once their comforts disappeared, once the conveniences I'd quietly funded fell apart, they finally felt what it was like to lose me. They didn't like it. And that's when the tone changed for good. I thought the panic would stay: digital angry texts, dramatic posts, frantic calls. But pressure like this doesn't stay on a screen. Not in my family. Not when entitlement is involved. It grows legs. It gets in the car. It drives hours. And it shows up at your front door. The breaking point didn't come with a scream. It came with a knock. A soft one at first, almost polite. I had just gotten home from work, still wearing my coat, grocery bag on the counter, when the buzzer rang downstairs. I ignored it. Then my phone lit up with my dad's name. I let it go to voicemail. The buzzer went off again, longer, sharper, like someone was leaning on it. A second later, my mom started calling, then my sister, then my uncle. A cascade of notifications that made my skin prickle. Something in my chest sank. They wouldn't. They wouldn't. I walked to the intercom and pressed the button just enough to hear the noise from the lobby. That's when I heard it, my mother's voice echoing up the stairwell. Aiden, we know you're home. Buzz us in. Her tone was forced cheerful. The way she spoke when she wanted strangers to think everything was normal. Underneath it, I could hear the anger simmering. My pulse spiked. I didn't answer. 2 minutes later, my hallway echoed with footsteps. Someone had let them into the building. I checked the peephole. My mom and dad stood outside my door, both holding shiny gift bags, like props in a commercial for a family they didn't actually have. Aiden, my mom called, knocking lightly. Honey, we brought you something. We drove 4 hours to be here. Her voice was sugary sweet. Practiced. Performed. I stepped closer but didn't unlock the door. I don't want to talk right now. You need to leave. The sweetness cracked instantly. You're being ridiculous, she snapped. Open this door. Now. My dad chimed in, irritated. We're not doing this through a door. Man up and open it. I swallowed hard. No. You humiliated me at dinner. You mocked me. And now you're here pretending gifts fix anything? My mom scoffed like she couldn't believe my audacity. Oh my God. Are you still on about that? It was a joke. Aiden, normal people can take a joke at a holiday dinner. That did it. That was the moment the rope around my chest finally snapped. I said, you don't get to define what hurts me. Silence. Then the knocking turned into pounding, full force, fists hitting wood. You open this door right now, my mom shouted, voice shaking. Your family is falling apart, and you don't even care. After everything we've done for you. My dad added, this isn't how adults handle disagreements. You owe us a conversation. Something old in me, the part trained to obey, to smooth things over, twitched. But something stronger held the line. I texted my mom, You have 10 minutes to leave. Or, I'm calling building security. Out loud, I said, go home. This isn't a discussion. My mom banged on the door so hard the frame rattled. Is this what you want? For your own mother to collapse from stress? For us to drive all the way here for nothing? Manipulation sharpened into desperation. Desperation sharpened into entitlement. I didn't open the door. Not for guilt. Not for fear. Not for tradition. I stood there with my hand on the lock. Heart racing. Repeating in my head, you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to say no. After 20 minutes of pounding, crying, threats, and guilt, they finally left furious, offended, and confused that the son who always folded didn't. I didn't know it then, but that night was only the warning shot. The moment everything truly broke wouldn't come until their next visit, the one that involved security, a hallway full of witnesses, and the first real consequences they'd ever faced. For a few days after that first hallway scene, my apartment felt like a bunker, quiet, still, sealed off from the storm outside. I muted every group chat, blocked the numbers that wouldn't stop calling, and tried to convince myself it was over. They'd thrown their tantrum, delivered their guilt, performed their outrage. Now, surely, they'd retreat and regroup. But they didn't retreat. They recalibrated. They went silent. The kind of silence that isn't peace, but pressure. A vacuum pulling tight around everything. At work, I found myself checking over my shoulder, expecting another wave. At home, I took the stairs instead of the elevator just so I wouldn't have to hear the buzzer and wonder if it was them again. I kept imagining the sound of pounding fists on my door. And then almost anticlimactically the real shift came not from them, but from a line in my grandfather's old trust documents. I'd pulled them out only because I needed something normal to focus on. Something that wasn't a text message, a voicemail, or a hallway confrontation. The papers were tucked inside a weathered file box. The one thing of his I'd taken with me when I left home at 19. I didn't expect to find anything in them, but I did. There, buried in the legal phrasing, was a clause listing me, not my father, as the secondary beneficiary of a small investment property my grandfather had owned. A duplex outside Madison. Nothing huge, but significant enough that the name on the title mattered. And the name was mine. Not a joint name, not a family name, mine alone. I stared at the paper for a long time. That snapshot of his handwriting in the margins. Make sure Aiden gets this directly hit me harder than anything in weeks. It felt like he was reaching forward in time to tap me on the shoulder and whisper, "You don't owe them your life." It wasn't revenge. It wasn't money. It was confirmation. A quiet, steadying reminder of who had actually seen me. I contacted the attorney listed, Brandon Hale. A man with a calm voice, and the kind of patience only people who've dealt with decades of family drama seem to have. He pulled the records, cross-checked the filings, and confirmed everything. Technically, he said, if your father or uncle have been drawing from this property or making decisions under the assumption it was theirs, that could be a problem for them, not for you. I exhaled a slow, cold breath that felt like opening a window in my chest. Mr. Hale, I said, I'd like to formalize my ownership and stop any access. He didn't hesitate. I'll prepare the notices. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was methodical, clean, professional. Exactly the opposite of how my family handled anything. The next few days felt like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. Brandon drafted formal revocations. He emailed copies to my father, my uncle, and the property manager, who had apparently been sending rent summaries to an old family email chain when I wasn't on. With one signature. All of that rerouted to me. I didn't add commentary. No long explanations. No emotional paragraphs. Every message I sent was short, cold, and perfectly polite. Effective immediately. All decisions must go through my attorney. Please remove your access from this account. I am exercising my legal rights as the sole beneficiary. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about withdrawing a currency they'd always assumed was theirs, my compliance. Meanwhile, I kept cutting the other threads too. Gym memberships gone. Streaming accounts dead. Prime access revoked. Shared rideshare profiles deleted. My mother's complaints got shorter. My dad's accusations quieter. My sister's subtweets fewer. Because entitlement doesn't know how to argue with silence. It only knows how to scream at pushback. The quiet was the real power shift. In that same silence, something else happened, something that caught me off guard. My neighbor from down the hall, the older woman who had recorded the confrontation, knocked on my door with a soft grocery bag in her arms. "I wasn't sure if you had time to cook," she said. "I made extra pasta. And I just wanted you to know I saw everything. And I'm sorry you're going through it." Her kindness cracked something in me, not the way my family had cracked me with humiliation, but in a way that made space instead of taking it away. People who aren't entitled to you treat you differently. They respect boundaries because they understand them. I'd forgotten what that felt like. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. The next morning, Brandon emailed all documents recorded, all notices delivered. I sat there staring at the screen while the meanings settled in like dust. I wasn't the one being controlled anymore. I wasn't the one being drained. I wasn't the one scrambling to hold everything together. I was the one who walked away. I was the one they underestimated. I was the one who finally had something they couldn't take back. A quiet shift. A clean break. A recalibration of balance they'd never expected. And once the silence solidified, once the legal lines were drawn, the panic started again. Not through texts. Not through guilt. Through something louder. Something public. They didn't just want access back. They wanted control back. And that desperation was what led to the confrontation that would make everything snap for good. I should have known they wouldn't stay quiet. Not my family. Not people who treated boundaries like insults and no like a personal attack. But even then, I wasn't prepared for how far they'd go or how public they'd make it. It happened on a Saturday afternoon in late December. Chicago winter was doing its usual thing, wind cutting sideways. Sky, the color of steel. The kind of cold that makes your teeth ache. I stopped by a cafe near my building to pick up coffee before heading to meet my attorney, Brandon, to finalize the property filings. I was halfway across the plaza outside my building when I heard it. Aiden sharp. Loud. Too familiar. I froze. No. Not here. Not in the middle of a busy plaza. But they were already striding toward me, my mom, my dad, and my Uncle Chuck's shoulders squared, like they were walking into battle. People turned to look. Someone stopped mid-sip of their latte. A couple walking their dog paused. My stomach dropped so hard I felt the pavement tilt. My mother reached me first. Her face twisted into a performance-ready mask of devastation. "How could you do this to us?" she cried, loud enough to turn every head in a 50-foot radius. "You're tearing this family apart." My dad stepped beside her, jaw clenched, eyes full of fury. "You've embarrassed us enough. We're fixing this. Now." My uncle was smirking like this was entertainment. "Told you the city would mess him up," he muttered. "Look at you, hiding behind lawyers." I felt heat crawl up my neck as strangers watched like we were street theater. My voice came out low. "Steady. You need to leave. We're not doing this here." My mother thrust something at me, a stack of printed emails. "You sent this to your father, to your own family. Legal threats, notices, how dare you?" I didn't take the papers. I exercised my rights. That's all. She scoffed so loudly people on the sidewalk flinched. "Rights. Rights," she shouted. "We raised you. We sacrificed for you. And this is how you repay us. My dad stepped up, so close I could smell his cologne. You listen to me. You're not going to take what your grandfather built and shut us out. That duplex has been in this family for years. You don't get to steal it. I kept my voice calm. I didn't steal anything. It was left to me. Legally. Directly. Grandpa chose that. Not me. My uncle barked a laugh. That old man didn't know what he was doing at the end. And you know it. Your dad took care of that place for years. You owe him. There it was. The word they used like a leash. Oh. I didn't respond. I didn't trust my voice not to shake. My mom folded her arms. You're going to sign it back to the family. Right here. Right now. Before I could answer, a calm voice cut in. He won't be signing anything. I turned. Brandon was striding toward us. Coat buttoned. Expression cool and composed. A folder tucked under his arm. He looked exactly like the kind of attorney who had no patience for theatrics. My mom's face twisted. And who are you supposed to be? His lawyer. Brandon said flatly. The one who sent you multiple certified notices you chose to ignore. My dad scoffed. Oh. Here we go. The big city attorney who thinks he can keep a family from talking. Brandon didn't flinch. You're not here to talk. You're here to intimidate my client. My son needs to learn, my dad began. No. Brandon interrupted. Your son needs space. You refuse to give him. My uncle stepped forward. This doesn't concern you. Brandon smiled not kindly. That's where you're wrong. He opened the folder and held up documents with tidy highlighted sections. These, he said calmly, are the property records your father-in-law signed, witnessed, filed. They designate Aiden as the sole beneficiary. Any attempt to use or claim the property without his permission is illegal. My dad's face went dark red. This is a family matter. No, Brandon replied. This is a legal matter. Then God bless this man. He turned slightly, so the crowd could hear him. And I should also mention harassment, stalking, repeated unwanted visits, and any attempt to coerce someone into signing away assets are criminal offenses in Illinois. A ripple moved through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Oh damn." Another person pulled out a phone. My mom panicked. How dare you humiliate us like this in public, Aiden? Stop him. I met her eyes. For the first time in my life. I didn't look away. You humiliated yourselves. I said quietly. My dad stepped forward. Finger in my face. You think you're better than us now. You think money makes you important. You're nothing without this family. Something in me broke open, not violently, but cleanly. Like a bone finally snapping into alignment. I'm not nothing. I said, I'm just not yours to control anymore. My uncle lunged forward like he wanted to grab my shoulder again. The same way he had in the hallway. But Brandon stepped between us. Voice sharp. Touch him, and I will have you arrested. A few passersby clapped. Someone whistled. My uncle froze. My mom's voice turned small. Desperate. Aiden, please. We're your family. You can't walk away. I took a breath that didn't shake. I'm not walking away. I said. I'm stepping back. And if that feels like abandonment to you, it's only because you were standing too close. The words hung in the cold air. My dad started to say something else. But the building's security team walked out at that exact moment. Two guards who recognized me immediately. One nodded. Mr. Hale, is everything okay here? Before I could answer, Brandon said, these three are not welcome to approach my client. They've been repeatedly warned. The guard turned to my parents and uncle. You need to leave the premises immediately. If you return or continue to harass this resident, the next step is police involvement. My mom burst into tears. My dad cursed under his breath. My uncle glared at me like I'd betrayed him personally. I didn't say a word. I just watched as security escorted them across the plaza and out toward the parking lot, furious. Humiliated. Unraveling. My mom looked over her shoulder once, eyes full of disbelief. My dad didn't look back at all. And for the first time in my life, I didn't follow. I didn't apologize. I didn't chase. I didn't explain. I just stood there in the freezing wind, feeling something settle inside me. A boundary. A truth. A closing door. I didn't slam it shut. I simply let it fall into place. And as they disappeared from view, I realized something with startling clarity. They weren't losing a son. They were losing their scapegoat. And I was finally free to be something else. In the weeks after that confrontation in the plaza, the silence that settled over my life didn't feel empty. It felt earned. It felt like oxygen. For the first time since I could remember, my days didn't revolve around managing someone else's crisis, guilt, embarrassment, or expectations. The constant buzzing in my chest, the one I'd mistaken for responsibility, my whole life finally started to fade. The consequences for my family came quietly but consistently. Like ripples from a stone, they pretended not to throw. My mom's health scare after the police incident became something she could no longer ignore. Her doctor apparently told her that stress wasn't just bad, it was dangerous. Without my card covering what she called the only things keeping her sane, she had to scale back. Budgeting apps, cheaper classes, fewer dinners out, more accountability than she'd ever allowed herself. My dad struggled more with pride than money, resetting passwords on his own, calling customer service, figuring out how to manage bills without simply forwarding statements to me. My cousin later told me he'd stopped bragging about being the backbone of the family, mostly because people were quietly asking why the backbone had been leaning on his son for everything. And my Uncle Chuck, the one who'd shoved my shoulder like he owned me, couldn't escape the consequences at all. The video my neighbor recorded made its rounds. People at his golf club whispered. Someone joked about him being the guy who got a citation for harassing his nephew. It wasn't jail, but it was a public crack in the image he'd cared about more than anything. My sisters went through their own reckoning. Concert selfies disappeared from their feeds. Sudden trips stopped. One of them even started picking up extra shifts once she realized my endless generosity wasn't something she could rely on anymore. And somewhere in the middle of all that change, I realized something important. My boundary didn't destroy my family. It revealed them, and then it forced them to grow. As for me, the real healing didn't start with the silence. It started with facing all the noise I'd ignored for years. I booked a therapist not as a crisis move, but as an act of clarity. The first session, she asked me a question that knocked something loose. When did you learn that love meant overfunctioning while everyone else underfunctioned? I didn't have an answer, but the question stayed with me. I joined a support group online. Read stories from people who grew up being the responsible one, the fixer, the easy target. Every comment felt like someone holding up a mirror I'd been too afraid to look into. My peace stopped feeling like guilt. It started feeling like home. And with that clarity came something I never expected: this urge to reach outward. Not to fix people, but to support them the way I wished someone had supported me. I started talking more with coworkers going through messy family dynamics. I shared parts of my story in online forums, not the dramatic parts, but the parts about boundaries, silence, and stepping away without hating yourself. I helped a friend from my gym navigate her own situation with a controlling parent. I talked with a neighbor who always apologized for taking up space, reminding her she didn't have to. I wasn't martyring myself. I wasn't trying to save anyone. I was simply doing what my grandfather did for me, turning pain into something useful, something that might keep someone else from drowning quietly. Every time someone said, "I thought I was the only one," something softened inside me. People think healing happens in big cinematic moments. Mine didn't. It happened in small ones, tiny decisions to treat myself like someone worth protecting. Months later, my mom sent me a short email. Not dramatic, not manipulative, just human. I'm sorry things got so bad between us. I miss you. I hope you're okay. It wasn't the apology I needed, but it was the one she could give. I replied gently. I told her I was okay. I hoped she was taking care of herself. I said that if we ever talked again, it would need to be with respect, calmness, maybe even a therapist. No yelling, no guilt, no rewriting history. It wasn't closure. It was a boundary with a door built into it, locked, but not sealed. And as I hit send, something clicked. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to win. I just wanted peace. And I finally had it. Because the truth is, sometimes the most profound revenge isn't walking away from the people who hurt you. It's building a life where they no longer get to define you, where your worth isn't negotiated, where your silence isn't submission, where your no isn't the beginning of war, where you choose the people who get to sit with you, and you're finally done being grateful for just being allowed in the room. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your own experience. Share where you're listening from, or tell me the moment you realized you needed boundaries. Your story might be the one someone else needs to hear. This content is created by the Kitchen Tables team for entertainment purposes only. It's fictional, not advice, and not meant to encourage real-life actions or decisions.